Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So you are welcome to another edition of our online classes. So our last class we discussed about rockets, where we treated the meaning of rockets, the component parts of rockets, and the major functions of the component parts of the rocket. Now, before we delve into the subject matter of today, which is the other part of the topic, which is the satellite. So I still want to include one or two things under the rocket. Now, I want to state that not all the countries of the world have been able to develop and advance equipment or machine to manufacture rockets. Just about nine major countries are able to do that successfully. And among those 9 different countries are US, France, India, China, Japan, North Korea, Israel, Iran, and France. Yes, again, I have US, France, Japan, China, India, Israel, Iran, and North Korea. So those are the 9 major countries that have been able to put rockets in space. And another thing that I still want to add is that you must be able to now add jet and rocket is being propelled or launched into space. Even though I think we've done that, yes, we've done that in LS2 topics under Newton's law, towards the end of the part of that topic, Newton's law, where we did under the application of Newton's and linear momentum. So I will still implore you to revisit that aspect. Now, today we want to look at satellite, and we've also treated satellite. Part of this satellite, we've treated it, but it's only that we may not even treated it in an elaborate manner. But we've tried to say one or two things, very cogent things about satellite, and that where we've done that is when you check your gravitational field, where we did a gravitational field, so we did satellite there, so you can still visit that aspect. Now today we want to look at satellite. What's the meaning of satellite? A satellite is any object. A satellite is any object or body that moves around a particular planet. Is an object that orbits or moves around a particular planet. It might be Earth, it might be Venus, Mars, or some other planets like that. So any object that's capable of moving around a particular planet is called satellite. Now we now have majorly we have 2 types of satellites. We have 2 major types of satellites. And what are these 2 types of satellites? We have the natural satellite and artificial satellite. We have the natural satellite and artificial satellite. We differentiated, you have notes on these types of satellites under gravitational field. So let me just, for the sake of discussion, so let me still explain natural and artificial satellite a little. So what is natural satellite? Natural satellite is any object that is moving around or that is orbiting a planet, but such satellite is not man-made. It's not man-made. So example of such natural satellite is moon. For instance, the Earth's moon, which is revolving or moving around the Earth, is an example of natural satellite. Other moons of some other planets are still referred to natural satellite. Why artificial satellites are called man-made satellites? They are satellites that are being manufactured or created by human beings which are also capable of moving around a planet. For instance, as we have many of these satellites located in the Earth's orbit. Many of these are located in the Earth's orbit. Now, let's look at some various component parts of the satellite. Various component parts of a satellite. Now, we have the first one. We have power. We have communication. We have guidance, and we have scientific instruments. Now, for any typical satellite, to function in space, such satellite must possess or must have the power source. And majorly, the power source for any satellite in space usually comes from two different sources. One, a satellite can make use of solar panel so as to absorb the solar radiation coming from the sun to generate its energy, or using nuclear method, that is nuclear power generation. So those are the two ways by which a satellite can have its power source. It can have its source from solar energy using solar panels. That's why we see some satellites, you have different arrays of solar panels. So the essence of those arrays of solar panels being attached to a particular satellite is for those arrays of solar panels to absorb solar radiation in space, then convert this solar radiation into electrical power being usable by a satellite. Now, the other one, which is the nuclear power source. So in this case, any satellite that is making use of that particular nuclear power generation, so there's no need for it to have solar arrays. So in this case, we just have inbuilt nuclear power plant. So satellite is going to have inbuilt nuclear power plant, where the fuel used in that inbuilt nuclear power plant can be uranium fuel or plutonium fuel. So I still want you to, because we've done how nuclear power can be generated, I think we've also treated that aspect. So if you check your note, you're still going to see how electricity is generated using nuclear process. Now that's the first one, which is power. Now a typical satellite, we also possess communication. So this communication, the element of this communication is that, or the major component part of this communication of a satellite is what we call the antenna. Now the function of this antenna is to receive or send signal between the satellite and the ground station. Don't forget, when you have a satellite in space, you have the ground station, that is the control station will be on the ground, that is on the earth surface. So there must be communication between the ground station and the satellite in space. So to send signal and receive signal, sending and receiving signal is possible for a particular satellite because of its what? Because of its antenna. So it uses the antenna to send or receive signals or to communicate with the ground station. Now we have the third one, the third component, which is the guidance. So the guidance keeps or allows the satellite to keep its particular direction in space, so as not to move away from its original orbit. So the one major part or component part of the satellite that allows the satellite to maintain its usual orbit is the guidance, and this guidance consists of either the gyroscope or star tracker. So the guidance consists of either the star tracker or the gyroscope. So this keeps the satellite in its usual orbit. And we have the fourth component part of the satellite, which is the scientific instrument. The scientific instrument can either be a camera, it can be infrared sensor, or it can also be radio antenna. So for any satellite to function properly in space, it must have either a camera to take the function of having a camera is either to take the photograph of the space or of a very far away star, or using that same camera to even take the picture, the photograph of the earth. Now if a satellite does not possess a camera, it can also possess an infrared sensor. You can use this sensor to sense any object in space or even on the earth surface, or even radio antenna for communication. So these are the major component parts of a satellite. So let's see this diagram. Let's look at this particular diagram. This is a typical diagram of a satellite. A typical diagram of a satellite. A satellite must have a communication device, also known as the antenna. It has a power source. You can see that power source are rays of solar panel for receiving solar radiation from the sun. You also have a science instrument being attached to it, and also we have the container. That container is the external part of the satellite, in which the whole component part of the satellite is housed. Yes, that is, the container house the entire component parts of the satellite. So let's also look at another diagram of a satellite. You can see clearly from here, you have the power source, you also have the internal computer, you have the communication. You can see the communication, the antenna, like a dish. So it uses that antenna to communicate with the ground station. So it uses that antenna to communicate with the ground station. So it uses that communications to send and receive signals to the ground station. And you can also see its orbit. That satellite is able to maintain its usual orbit by the use of its guidance, either its star tracker or gyroscope. So that's another example, another diagram of a satellite. You can see this. That's the below part of that satellite is the picture or the photograph of the earth. So you can see how that satellite is being kept in its orbit. So it's moving around the earth. The earth is seen underground. So let's look at the uses of satellites. Let's look at the uses of satellites. One, satellite is used for communication. So we use satellites for communication. The communication, for instance, we are able to communicate with somebody at the other end of the world, or somebody that is in US, China, or some other part of the country. We are able to communicate efficiently because of some communication satellites being located in the space. So they made this communication more efficient and even possible on the Earth's surface. So two, a satellite is used to forecast weather condition. So even because we have different types of satellites, we have communication satellite, and all these types of satellites, they don't perform the same function. So the communication satellite cannot perform the function of weather satellite. So the weather satellite is used to forecast weather condition for a particular place, or for a particular country or continent. And three, it is used for global position system, that is GPS. So if you are traveling from here, for instance, maybe you are visiting a particular city that you've never been before and you don't know the exact position or the exact place that you are going. With this GPS, you can easily locate using the Google map and this communication, this position system is quite possible as a result of the satellite located in space, which is taking the position or the location of every place on the Earth's surface. So a satellite also makes it possible to locate a particular point or a particular position on the Earth's surface. So it's very useful in the area of global position system, that is for location of a particular place. And the next one is, it is also used to take picture of the Earth. Not only to take the picture of the Earth, it can also take some satellites like Hubble Space Telescope, HST. HST is one of the satellites located in Earth's orbit, and that Hubble Space Telescope is a telescope that can be used to take far away picture of the galaxies or stars. So not only that, a satellite can be used to take the picture of the Earth, it can also be used to take the picture of some other planet or even distant objects like stars and galaxies. And lastly, we have the satellite can also be used to map piece of land or area to prevent natural disasters like erosion, flood, etc. Like weather satellite. So the weather satellite can be used to monitor or for monitoring natural disasters like erosion and flooding. Now, before we go into Nigerian satellites, we have different satellites that have been launched into space. About over 8,000 satellites have been successfully put into the Earth's orbit. Some of these satellites are placed in low Earth orbit. Some of these satellites are placed in low Earth orbit, while some are placed in medium orbit of the Earth, while some are placed in a far away orbit of the Earth. Now, some examples of satellites that have been successfully put into space are Sputnik 1. Sputnik 1 is a satellite launched about in the year around 1956 or 57 by Russian cosmonauts, that's Soviet Union. And after that, we have Explorer. The Explorer is a US satellite. That Explorer is launched. It's a satellite launched by US. Also is located or is put in Earth's orbit. France also launched its own satellite called Asterix, and we have some other satellites that are located in the Earth's orbit. Even we have another artificial laboratory that is revolving around, or that is moving around the Earth, and this artificial laboratory is called ISS. We call it International Space Station. International Space Station. So International Space Station is an artificial satellite, habitable artificial satellite. Habitable, that is, human beings can survive in it, even though it's not located on the Earth's surface. It's put about 400 kilometers from the Earth's surface, so it's still habitable. And this ISS, as an habitable satellite, is not just only one country that launched it into space. Is the work of about 5 different countries coming together, putting it together, and created or manufactured this kind of a satellite used for performing different kind of laboratory experiments that are ordinarily not performed, or that cannot be performed on the Earth's surface. So such experiment that in which the influence of Earth gravity can affect it. So such experiment can be taken to International Space Station. And these 5 countries that put Earth together to create this satellite, we have the NASA from the US, NASA, NASA from the US. We have the ESA, that is European Space Station. We also have Japan. We have Canadian Space Station. Then we also have the Russian Space Agency. So these 5 countries coming together to manufacture or created the habitable artificial satellite called International Space Station. So it's an effective satellite that has been in space for a very long period of time. So now let's look at Nigerian satellites. 5 different satellites. Nigeria are able to launch about 5 different satellites into space. So we are going to look at the component part of these satellites, their importance or their uses to Nigeria and to Africa at large. Now, the first satellite put into space by the Nigerian government is called Nigerian Sat-1. That is Nigerian Satellite 1. So this satellite was launched in the year 2003, precisely September 27. And what's the function of the Nigerian Satellite 1? Its major function is for monitoring disaster across the Nigerian soil and the nearby countries. So the major function of Nigerian Satellite 1 is for monitoring disaster on the Nigerian land and some other part of the African countries. Now, this Nigerian Satellite 1 is incomplete, or let me say this Nigerian Satellite 1 was incomplete together with some other satellites from other countries. Now, how do I mean? We have what you call DMC. DMC is an international organization in which Nigeria is part of that organization. And the full meaning of DMC means Disaster Monitoring Constellation. Now, this DMC, that is Disaster Monitoring Constellation, consists of 7 different countries, inclusive of Nigeria. We have China, UK, Vietnam, Thailand, Turkey, and Algeria. So these 7 different countries, NASA, they created, each of these countries has its own disaster monitoring satellites, and all these 7 different satellites from all these 7 countries now have the ability to communicate with one another, sharing information among themselves. And in this case, the satellite is majorly used for monitoring disaster or to control any natural disasters on the Nigerian soil, and such information being recorded by the Nigerian Sat-1 can be shared among all other DMC countries, that is China, UK, Vietnam, Thailand, Turkey, and Algeria. So let's look at the features of Nigerian Sat-1. So it has a micro satellite operating in low Earth orbit. Don't forget I said some satellites are launched to low Earth orbit. For instance, International Space Station is in low Earth orbit, about 400 kilometers away from the Earth surface. So it's in low Earth orbit. Some are about 20,000 kilometers away, 25,000, 30,000, 36,000 kilometers away from the Earth's orbit. So about 36,000 kilometers away from the Earth, so we can talk about some that are far away from the Earth's orbit. But launch the satellite to about 400 kilometers, 500 kilometers, 600 kilometers, we still consider them to be in low Earth orbit. So Nigerian Sat-1 was launched into low Earth orbit, and it has a mass of about 100 kg. It has a mass of about 100 kg, and it also has a tendency, ability to communicate with other 6 DMC satellites. That is, it can share information being recorded with other disaster monitoring constellation satellites. It has its ground control station. That is, it has its control station being located in Abuja, precisely in Asokoro, Abuja. So we have uses of Nigerian Sat-1. What are the major uses of Nigerian Sat-1? Because we said it's majorly designed to monitor disaster. So the first use is that the satellite is used for disaster management, e.g. in monitoring flooding, erosion and desertification, particularly in the northern part of the Nigeria. So it's used for disaster management. It's also used in demography, that is for planning and monitoring the population of a particular place in Nigeria, and it's also used for agricultural purpose. It also have its uses in the area of solid mineral exploration, and in the area of defense and security, and also in education and capacity building. So it has the ability or the tendency to perform all these functions, or it has all these uses and some others. So the second satellite launched by Nigerian government was Nigerian Communication Satellite 1. Nigerian Communication Satellite 1. So as the name implies, it means that this particular satellite is mainly used for communication purpose. It's mainly used for communication purposes. So, and this satellite was launched in the year 2007. That was May 13th, 2007, and has its major contribution in the area of information and communication and technology. So this satellite was the second satellite of Nigeria being launched into space, but the first African communication satellite in space, and first African communication satellite in space. And a year after the launch of Nigerian communication satellite, it was deorbited because the satellite failed in its orbit being launched to, and it was later being replaced. It means that the satellite was only functioned for about a year before it was failed in the orbit. And what actually caused that failure was as a result of its power loss. Because I told you that one major component part of a satellite is the power source. If a satellite has no power, it cannot function in space. So the Nigerian communication satellite had power loss issue, so it was unable to perform the function for which it was launched into space, and it was later replaced. So its replacement, we are going to talk about it in the next 1 or 2 slides. Now, what are the uses of Nigerian Communication Satellite 1? The function of Nigerian Communication Satellite 1, the first one is that it is used in telepresence. It is used in telepresence. And what is the meaning of telepresence? Telepresence means the product of sharing. Telepresence means the product of sharing an information or rendering a particular service without being physically present. Telepresence means rendering a particular service or sharing an information with some people without being physically present. Example of such telepresence service might be e-commerce. What meaning of e-commerce? That's electronic commerce. You know that it is quite possible for us to make transaction online without the buyer and even the seller to see each other one-on-one. So that's one aspect of telepresence. Another aspect of telepresence, we have what you call e-learning. E-learning means electronic learning. That is, it's quite possible for us to learn some things online. So that process is also one of the areas in which telepresence has its uses. So we also have e-library. You have e-library, e-learning, and then e-commerce, and then the rest. So those are the areas of telepresence. Now we have another use of Nigeria Communication Satellite is that it is used in TV broadcasting. Don't forget that we say the Nigerian Communication Satellite is mainly launched into space to enhance or to boost the communication services of Nigeria and its nearby environs. So it is used in TV broadcasting. Also, it is used in telecommunication purposes like telephone and mobile phone. Also used for internet and multimedia purposes. Used for internet and multimedia purposes. Now, we have the third one. This third satellite of Nigeria, there are two being launched at the same time. So we have Nigeria Sat 2 and Nigeria Sat X. Now, before I thought about Nigeria Sat 2 and Nigeria Sat X, the Nigerian Communication Satellite, that is this one, the Nigerian Communication Satellite. The Nigerian Communication Satellite was built. The Nigerian Communication Satellite was built by a Chinese-based company, and it was launched using a Chinese carrier rocket. A Chinese carrier rocket. And the Nigerian satellite, the Nigerian Sat 1, that is the Nigerian Satellite 1. The Nigerian Satellite 1 was built by a United Kingdom based company, while Nigerian Communication Satellite was built by Chinese based company. So you take note of that. Now let's look at Nigeria Sat 2 and Nigeria Sat X. Nigeria Sat 2 and Nigeria Sat X. The Nigeria Sat 2 was the third satellite launched by Nigerian government, and Nigeria Sat X was the fourth Nigerian satellite launched by the Nigerian government, and they were being launched. Each of these satellites, they have the mass of about 300 kg. Each of them. That is, Nigeria Sat 2 has mass of about 300 kg, while Nigeria Sat X also has about a mass of about 300 kg. And these two satellites was put in space in 17 August 2011. 17 August 2011. And their major functions, their users and their major functions are not quite different from their predecessor, and their predecessor was Nigeria Sat 1. So they perform the same function with that of Nigeria Sat 1, but they are the advanced satellite of Nigeria Sat 1. That's just the major difference. They are the advanced satellites. They are more advanced than Nigeria Sat 1. And Nigerian Communication Sat 1R. This is the fifth Nigerian satellite launched into space. And what brought about this Nigerian Communication Satellite 1R is that because when I was explaining Nigerian Communication Satellite 1, we said that Nigerian Communication Satellite 1 was only functioned for about a year before it had a problem in space and later replaced. Now, its replacement is it was being replaced that Nigerian Communication Sat 1 was replaced with Nigerian Communication Sat 1R. Nigerian Communication Sat 1 was replaced by Nigerian Communication Sat 1R. And this Nigerian Communication Sat 1R was also built by a Chinese-based company, the same way the Chinese-based company built the first one, that is the predecessor of Nigerian Communication Sat 1R, which is Nigerian Communication Sat 1. So is also perform the same function as Nigerian Communication Sat, that is to assist or enhance the communication or the information and communication technology to boost the information and the communication technology of Nigeria and its environs. So these are the major 5 different satellites that have been put in space by Nigeria, by Nigerian government. So I think now, in order to build, let me also add this. In order to build a satellite, I said we have not all the countries have the capacity to build satellites or to manufacture rockets. Now, majorly the finance of building or manufacturing a satellite or rocket is only being championed by the federal government of a particular country. But we now have some other private companies. We have some other private companies come into the manufacturing of satellites and even rockets. A perfect example of these private companies that have the capacity to also build a rocket or satellite, we have SpaceX company, that is a SpaceX company owned by a US based company, but a private company owned by a man called Elon Musk. So this company also ventured in the manufacturing of space equipment, rocket satellites, and some other aspects. Now, and is quite a huge project for a particular government or a particular country to have a rocket or a satellite. Maybe that's why we have just limited number of countries ventured into that. Don't forget, I said we have majorly about 9 different countries are able to manufacture or work in the area of manufacturing of rockets. That is, talk about the US, Russia, and then the rest. Even though some other countries, even though they don't have the capacity to build a rocket or a satellite, so they still employ the service of all these advanced countries. That's why when Nigeria wanted to build his first rocket, that's Nigerian Sat 1. So I said that Nigerian Sat 1 was built by a UK based company. So, and then the second one, which is Nigerian Communication Satellite, was built by a Chinese based company. Now, we've come to this where we are going to draw the curtain for today's class. So your assignment here are these 3 questions. So the first one states that you state 4 uses of satellite other than the ones given above. No, I've already given you some use of satellite, so I want to give me another 4. quite different from the one you have been given. 2. Write short note on telepresence, just short note. And you give a service that can be rendered through telepresence.